Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the third episode of Tides of Lore. My name is Robert Silva, and I'm one half of your host team today, joined as always by my good friend Tim. How you doing, Tim?
I'm good. Classic came out. We've been playing a lot. Having a good time. Created our own guild. That's been fun.
It's been quite an adventure all around. You all have been going hard at it. I haven't been on nearly as much as I was expecting to be. Tried to do the druid, but I probably will be abandoning it for another mage. Mage and classic just calls to me.
Well, it's just the best class leveling. Definitely a mage. Warrior is the best class, end game. But just leveling, definitely a mage.
And the amount of money that I can make, because I don't have to spend any money, it's just great. But last time, Tim, what did we talk about, Tim?
We talked about how the orcs came through the portal, the chain of events that got them here. The Guardian, whether Agewind or Medivh, we talked about those, their power.
With all of that, we've finally set the stage for what I've kind of been alluding to for this entire podcast, and it's now time for the first and the second war. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to Tides of Lore on YouTube, or if you're on Spotify, leave us a 5-star rating. It really helps the channel, ensures you won't miss a moment of this adventure. Now let's get started. So, we got a lot to cover. The first war is going to be like 10 minutes. The second war is going to be a lot longer than that, but we're gonna get through this. So
strap in.
All right, so just hop into it. The first war, back just before the Dark Portal opened, something that I did forget to mention is that the Horde was actually really desperate to find even more people to join the cause to get through the portal. So they started working with the ogres. And there were a lot of clans that really hated this, especially clans like the Warsong, because they, like Grommash Hellscream, had been held prisoner by ogre warlords during the Gorian Empire and stuff like that. So there was already a big disconnect with a lot of the clans there, and especially other clans like the Frostwolf with Durotan was clearly very resentful towards Gul'dan for bringing them into the Horde. But they do play a really big part upon arriving on Azeroth, because when the ogres arrive on Azeroth, well, I guess even before that, they go to the caves of Nagrand and they find those pale-skinned orcs with the tattooed faces. And they take them, and because these guys have already connected with the Void, they are insane, but they also begin raving about a prophecy called the Hour of Twilight. And Cho'gall, which is this major, kind of like Gul'dan's new apprentice, basically, hears about this. He's not too interested in this prophecy, but he does see that they have these new shadow powers. So he's very interested in unlocking that ability. But when they do arrive on Azeroth, they immediately begin hearing the whispers of the old gods. And the old gods, just to quickly go over it, massive void entities, kind of like the Titans, but the bad guys versions. And we'll get to them probably next time, if not a little bit later. But they're kind of the big bads of most of classic WoW, most of up to like Legion, or I guess even BFA. And they begin whispering to Cho'gall and this group that he's formed his clan into, which is called the Twilight's Hammer. Begins to listen to them and work for them as well as Gul'dan. But again, there is a bit of a disconnect because Gul'dan works for the Legion, and the old gods aren't necessarily aligned with the Legion. They are just kind of two of the worst.
You spoke of the Hour of Twilight. What, wasn't that a raid? I swear.
Yes. That is going to be the Cataclysm raid. And it pretty much is, I believe, the Deathwing fight.
Really? So interesting.
But it's basically a prophecy of when the entire world will be veiled in shadow and the Void will become like one with the world. It's essentially the end of time. And the reason that it's part of that raid is because Deathwing also hears the whispers of these old gods, but we'll talk about him a little bit later.
It's just cool how like this plays into that, because I was like, I've heard that name before, the Hour of Twilight.
Even now as we play like classic WoW, a lot of it is coming into play as you actually play the game right now. So it's really interesting to have all this set up. But also upon arriving, certain other warlocks that arrived on Azeroth would begin to feel the connection to the elemental spirits, because unlike on Draenor, these elemental spirits weren't dead. They were also corrupted by the old gods, because the old gods ruled this planet for a long, long time ago, called the Black Empire. But again, details. But upon connecting with these elemental spirits, certain of these former shaman, one specifically of the Frostwolf, Drekthar, would be so overwhelmed by the connection to these spirits that he would be like, you know what? Maybe Fel was a mistake, and I'll put that behind me. So he would renounce using Fel magic, and it would really come in handy, because pretty quickly after the Frostwolves arrive with the rest of the Horde into the Black Morass, they are banished from the Horde. Gul'dan doesn't like that he's constantly being talked back to. He doesn't like that Durotan can be seen as like a beacon for resentment or rebellion amongst the Horde. So he says, you know what, you and your people, you're not welcome to Black Morass. You're not welcome in the Horde. Get out of here.
Has Fel ever not turned someone crazy? Like, has Fel ever been a good idea?
I guess if demon hunters would be considered not crazy.
Well, don't they gouge their eyes out? And...
yeah. So, I mean, it's like, it's really debatable. I mean, they're good guys, right? But like, to attain such power, it still seems a bit crazy.
Yeah, I was just thinking of like when Fel was a good idea, you know? Like...
I don't know for sure. I mean, I'm sure we might see more of it as we do move into TBC. I think there are some specific warlocks and whatnot that do make it a bit.
I guess
more...
warlocks kind of help us. Yeah, some.
Well, warlocks literally summon demons, so I would say that they are just like actually evil. But we're like,
gray.
It's okay. They're on our side.
Yeah.
So as the Frostwolf were banished, they head north. Draka brings his wife and I believe she's pregnant with his child. So they're heading north. And while this would normally be really dangerous territories where they're constantly running into humans, this actually ends up being a really easy trip, because the elements actually help guide them past all of these people by like, well, they'll be covered in a snowstorm and you'll be able to sneak right past them. There are still a few conflicts, but they do manage to get pretty far north in the Eastern Kingdoms to an area known as the Alterac Valley.
The good old battleground.
And we'll get to see why that's such a big battleground too. A little bit later down into the Second War. But that's what we know about the Frostwolf. So they're all the way over there, back at the Black Morass, Blackhand's leading as war chief of the Horde. And he initially, seeing the Twilight's hammer that worked for Cho'gall, is really like not a fan of them. And he's like, they're too crazy. I don't trust them. I think I'm going to just kill all of them. And Cho'gall's like, please wait. No, stop. I promise that if you give them, like, if you make me official war chief of their like little clan, I'll keep them in line and you won't have to worry about them at all. And he's like, fine, do that and they can stay. And he does. He manages to pretty much immediately, overnight, put them all in line, and he keeps them all in check. And he basically does this because he promises them that if they trust him, he'll bring the Hour of Twilight. And they're like, well, again, we love the Hour of Twilight, so we'll absolutely follow you. But also Cho'gall really does, having heard from the old gods, he now believes in the Hour of Twilight as well. At first it was just ravings of like crazy people, but now he has like some actual validation to it. So he begins to write down this these teachings and whatnot that he's hearing from the Voids, tattooing them onto the skin of certain orcs. Eventually he would just flay them and then take that skin and make it into a book.
Nice.
And this book is called the Twilight Canticle. And I'm sure that we've encountered this at some point, but to be honest with you, I don't know where it comes into play. Maybe Dire Maul or something like that. It would make sense.
I swear I've seen a book like that in, correct me if I'm wrong, like Dark Shore. There's that like weird area right before Asheville, you know, where all those Twilight cultists. I swear there's a book there that like opens up. And this might be in, I don't know if it's in classic or retail, but I swear you go near it, like opens up and it stuns you, and it looks like it's like made of skin.
I was actually doing that quest yesterday. Yeah,
it's
has
in
like
classic?
a shadow hand that'll pimp hand you. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. That reminds me. What if that's that book?
I mean, it definitely could be, but also I'm pretty sure that those are the Twilight people, so they are definitely raving about similar things, if not the same shit.
Very interesting.
But upon their arrival in Alterac Valley, Durotan and his wife, or she would have their child, and they would name this child Goel. And initially, because they had not drank the fell blood back on Draenor, they assumed that they would be safe from this corruption. But when their child is born, it has green skin. So it's clear that no matter what the orcs do, they will all eventually become corrupted with this fell corruption if they still continue to use these magics and call upon these powers. And it's really enrages Durotan. So he officially sets in action that, well, I'm going to kill Gul'dan. I'm going to dismantle the Horde leadership, and I'm going to need help to do it. So he contacts his old friend through Drekthar being their shaman again, sends Orgrim a dream saying, meet with your old buddy Durotan over in the mountains of Cosmodan. And he's like, okay, will do. And he takes a small group of his soldiers and he goes to meet with Durotan. And as Durotan and him speak, he tells him, like, yeah, there's a Shadow Council manipulating it, the entire Horde. They're using fell magic, and it's going to, kill all of us. And Orgrim, being from the Black Rocks, he sees this firsthand. Like, there are plenty of his own clan that are beginning to fall to this fell corruption as well. So he's like, yeah, I agree. We have to do something, but it's not the right time right now. We need to wait. So he's like, I'll send you with my guards back to Alterac. And when the time's right, I'll call for you to help me challenge leadership. And this was a mistake, because his guards actually worked for Gul'dan. So upon hearing about this plot, they're like, well, Gul'dan's going to want these people dead. So as they take Durotan and Draka and their infant son back to Alterac, they ambush them. And they do, like, Durotan and Draka manage to kill one of the orcs, but they are all killed with the exception of the infant, who was just left in the snow, presumably to die. Eventually, a human would come across the infant to take him to somewhere else, and we'll get more into that in the next episode, or the Third War. But
a human helped an orc.
This human's kind of crazy, and he's very lustful for power, so he saw this more as an opportunity than anything. But when Doomhammer doesn't hear back from him, he sends more scouts to go see what happens, and he finds the bodies of Durotan and Draka and the orcs that he had sent with them. So he knows, well, these guys were traitors, and also if they get back to Gul'dan, they're going to tell him that I'm a traitor too. So he sends more of his guys after them, basically, and they do manage to catch them before they reach Gul'dan and kill the assassins that had killed Durotan and Draka. So for the meantime, Doomhammer is able to play along with the Horde's plans until the right opportunity. And the right opportunity would come pretty soon. However, there would be that first siege of Stormwind that we kind of talked about in the last episode with Medivh. And this was a really kind of pivotal battle. It was Cho'Gall's Twilight's Hammer and Kilrog Deadeye's Bleeding Hollow that were mostly led into it. And they pretty much just slammed into the walls of Stormwind. And at first they were crushing all the Alliance that were on the walls, or I guess the Stormwind soldiers just at this point. And they thought, well, it's going to be over by the end of the day. This will be easy. And then Anduin Lothar shows up with pretty much all of the knights of Stormwind that had taken a boat north to come and cut them off through the Red Ridge Mountains. And as they're being hit from the rear, the gates of Stormwind swing open, and all the rest of the knights just come rushing out, and they catch him in a pincer maneuver. And it is a slaughter. The reason that they were able to get this information was because Garona, who we were previously talking about for the Medivh episode, had been feeding basically both sides information, but she had told the King of Stormwind about the plan that Blackhand was going to go with, and the Twilight Hammer, and where they were going to come from. So that's how this plan was able to come into fruition. And It is basically the biggest loss that the Horde faced during the First War. Black Hand's like, I'm going to kill Cho'gall and I'm going to kill... That's really all he wants to do most of the time. He's like, I'm going to kill Cho'gall. I'm going to kill Kilrog. You guys are the worst. And they're like, no, please don't. Also at this time, like I said, the Battle of Karazhan was going on, basically, with Khadgar, Lothar, and Garona. Because right after that, Lothar leaves Stormwind to go and, check on Medivh because crazy shit's going on over there. And eventually, like we said, Medivh will die. But as he's dying, Gul'dan's actually using the Fel magic to peer into this Guardian's mind because he's so corrupted at this point. And he's searching through his memories. And as he's searching through his memories, he's looking for the Tomb of Sargeras. He believes that's where he can find true power. Then Medivh dies. And when the Fel magic that is unleashed from Medivh's death goes off, it literally just slams into Gul'dan's mind and immediately throws him into a coma. Not too unlike how Medivh would go into a coma earlier.
Is Gul'dan doing this from Outland or Draenor?
I believe he's doing this from the Black Morass itself, but they do eventually end up moving him north, and we'll see that. The point is that with Gul'dan in a coma, the Horde weakened, and the Twilight Hammer and all these kind of more corrupted clans weakened, Doomhammer sees his opportunity. So he goes and he challenges Black Hand to Mak'gora. And just for those who don't play WoW, a Mak'gora is when two combatants fight in a one-on-one duel.
To the death.
No magic.
To the death.
To the death, yeah. So, and this is something that has been in Orc culture forever, and you cannot refuse it without losing basically all the respect of anyone that serves under you. So... Orgrim and Blackhand, they duel for hours. And eventually, Doomhammer manages to, with the Doomhammer, smash the skull of Blackhand. And with that, everyone is, all in agreement. It's pretty simple. You kill the biggest guy, you are now the biggest guy. So, upon doing this, Orgrim becomes the war chief of the Horde. And first thing he does is no more Fel magic. Anyone who's using Fel magic, I'ma kill you. I swear to God.
He's a big warrior, Chad, huh?
Oh yeah. He's not about none of that magic. He's about bonk. We're orcs. We bonk.
Yeah. As one does.
And the Shadow Council, what's remaining of them, they're like, well, fuck, we got to get out of here. So they flee to this location that had been previously set up by Cho'gall, called the Blackrock Spire. And this is in a mountain that is to the north called Blackrock Mountain. And it's like this massive volcano, kind of. It's not really a volcano, I don't think, but it looks like one. And it is home to the elemental spirit of fire, which is a pretty powerful entity by the name of Ragnaros. And again, like I mentioned, the elements are enslaved by the old gods. So they want to help the Twilight's Hammer, but they also are like, yeah, you know what? I think this chaos that the Horde will bring will be pretty effective for us in the long run as well. So we'll allow you to stay in the Blackrock Spire for now. And then the next course of action for Orgrim is, well, we still have to take Stormwind. Despite him not necessarily agreeing with how they ended up here or whatnot, the fact of the matter is they still need a home and they're going to have to fight for it. He, this time, calls every part of the Horde over. And he's like, we're going to take Stormwind, and it's happening now. So he sieges the city again. And this time, the walls will fall, and the orcs will begin pouring into the city. And while the Stormwind Knights are fighting valiantly and doing all they can to fight off the enemy and defend their city, Garona would arrive back in Stormwind after the events of Karazhan. And again, having told King Lane and Lothar all of these previous plans, they didn't really have any reason to not trust her. But also, they don't know the full extent of how corrupting Fel magic can be, because Gul'dan had kind of planted a seed earlier in her mind long ago to be like, if you see the king, kill him. What? And normally she's a sleeper was able
agent.
To just
she's a sleeper agent. That's crazy.
She goes there fully expecting to just talk with the king when her mind snaps. And this seed that Gul'dan planted comes to fruition, and she draws her dagger and in front of his son assassinates King Lane by stabbing him in the heart.
Wow.
And like I said, Prince Varian Wrynn will witness this. And it's kind of what leads to him being very resentful towards orcs for most of his life. But then Lothar and Khadgar arrive as well. Garona will flee after the assassination, but as Lothar and Khadgar arrive, Stormwind is just in flames, and they see that it's basically beyond salvation. So they gather Varian, the queen, all of the survivors that they can, and they flee to the docks. And there they begin to set off, and as they're leaving, they burn all the rest of the ships in the harbor so that they can't be followed. And that is where the very first war comes to an end. The Horde destroys Stormwind and reigns victorious under the new leadership of Orgrim Doomhammer. Thank you for tuning in to Tides of Lore. If you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow adventurers. Your support makes all the difference. Thank you. And then we can move on to the second war, which is going to be significantly more dramatic, because here we have a bunch of players coming in. We have the trolls, we have the goblins, we have the elves, we have the dwarves, we have the gnomes, all coming into play, as well as this conflict between the humans and the orcs.
This is a world war, it sounds like.
Yeah, and I would say the third war is really where it comes world war, because that's where you get like all of the continents coming into play, including like Northrend and everything too.
Yeah.
Right now, this is strictly kept to the Eastern Kingdoms. So with the destruction of Stormwind, Doomhammer's like, all right, now I'm going to go kill the rest of that Shadow Council, because they're the reason that we're in this shit position, and I don't tolerate traitors. So he manages to capture Garona, who is trying to escape Stormwind at the time. And, you know, he sees her as a double agent and an assassin of Gul'dan. So he just has her tortured. And he's like, tell me where, you know, the Shadow Council is. And through enough torture, she tells him. And he takes all of the Horde north to this Blackrock mountain. And as they arrive, I feel like some of the Shadow Council was expecting like the elements of fire to help them out. And there's also this group inside called the Dark Iron Dwarves that they were probably expecting would help them out. And they don't. All of them go hide under the commands of the old gods to just pretend that they're not there for now. So Orgrim comes crashing in the Shadow Council's like meeting, and him and his orcs, they just murder all of them, and he completely purges the Shadow Council. I believe that Cho'gall would have had Gul'dan brought here. If not, he's still kept somewhere. But for one reason or another, Orgrim does decide to spare Cho'gall. Maybe it's just because he truly believes that he's going to need the Twilight's hammer for what's coming next. Or maybe it's because Cho'gall actually does prove to be fairly useful. He does introduce Orgrim to the Dark Iron Dwarves, and they begin to tell him secrets about like the secrets of the mountain, as well as like all of how they make their weapons and stuff like that. So he sees it as a way to reinforce his army, especially after how many of his guys died in the first two sieges of Storm.
I thought, wasn't Orgrim enslaved by ogres?
I believe
no,
it was
that someone
Bromwich.
else? Oh, that was someone else? Okay.
Yeah. And the Hellscreams, they're actually still back on Draenor. But he needs them now. He's decided that we're all coming to Azeroth. Anyone, even the ones that I think might be a bit more crazy on Draenor. I'm calling you guys to action now. So he calls the Hellscreams. He calls to like the Bone Chewers. He calls to all these bunch of groups that he had previously left on Draenor, because he's like, oh, I don't know if I can trust having them in this war without killing their own dudes. He's like, I need you guys now. But it would still take them a really long time to get from the Black Portal all the way up to where they were at. And also, by the time his scouts get back from Draenor, they tell him, they're like, yeah, there's only a few disciplined orcs left and maybe a few ogres. But the rest of them have killed each other. And that's kind of frustrating, because again, he needs reinforcements if he's to continue to... His plan is to basically conquer the Eastern Kingdoms. He thinks if he takes this whole continent, this will be their new home. So despite the fact that the humans would flee by the sea to the north, heading for a new kingdom called Lordaeron, he needs to figure out a way to catch up with them and to defeat them once he gets there. So one of these clans that he's helping, the Dragonmaw, which we kind of briefly talked about in the first episode, their leader, Zulhead, begins to get visions granted by Deathwing, who is actually corrupted by the old gods. He was recently awoken by the opening of the Dark Portal, and now he's starting to kind of move pawns the same way that the old gods are, but he's more of like a lieutenant as they are like commanders. Still very powerful. Anyway, he shows them visions of riding dragons into battle and riding and gaining the power of this magical artifact that is so powerful that it can enslave dragons. And with these visions, he begins to send his warlock, Necros Skullcrusher, to go capture this artifact. And this artifact was actually the Dragon Soul. It was what Deathwing had tried to use to betray all of his other allies earlier, but it was actually so powerful that it ripped his body apart. And it was basically that no dragon could use it, but an orc could. Upon getting this artifact, Necros renames it to the Demon Soul because it does just pulse with fell magic as well. While, they're learning a bunch from this, they had actually killed a red dragon to claim the artifact, and obviously that pissed off the other red dragons, mainly their red aspect, Alexstrasza, who was looking for this artifact because this is pretty imperative. It's this big deal to have this thing go missing. And she actually ends up getting captured by it as well, because she's not expecting anyone to have, either been able to kill a dragon and take it or even wield the artifact at all. So she is basically enslaved by this artifact and kept prisoner through its magical power. And they keep her in this place called Grim Patrol.
Familiar.
Which we'll get to.
The dungeon. There's a dungeon called... Right? That place?
Yep. And that is mostly where you'll find a lot of it's in the most recent...
Yeah, we did it together.
Yeah. It's in the most recent season of class retail.
It
That's
sucked,
what it's
man.
called.
Oh my gosh.
It does. Bro, I watched a paladin go in with wings and full HP and immediately get one-shotted. And I was like, oh no.
Yeah, it's a scary place.
And that's why they'll keep Alexstrasza for a while. But at this time, Doomhammer begins to call upon the Horde to continue pushing north. They're going to continue their conquest to claim the Eastern Kingdoms, which from Blackrock Mountain would now lead them into Khazmodan. And that's where they'll encounter the gnomes and the dwarves pretty much for the first time. And the gnomes and the dwarves have really good weapons and pretty much like cities that cannot be sieged traditionally like the other ones can. They, with the help of some goblins, do manage to get some ground, but upon sieging Khazmodan and Ironforge and Nomergon, they can't get in. Like they're like, all right, I'm gonna leave one clan here, and you guys prevent them from coming out, and we're just gonna use all their forges and stuff out here and take all their resources, and they do. And with all these resources, they build new weapons, they build new armor, and the main thing that they need ships, because they're either going to have to sail across to get to Lordaeron and Hillsbrad, or they're going to have to cross through some pretty shitty territory of like Rathi Highlands and stuff like that, going across a few bridges. It proved to be a much more challenging assault if they were to go that way. So they begin to build ships in the wetlands to the north while they keep the gnomes and the dwarves stuck in their city. And with this, the refugees from the gnomes and the dwarves arrive in Lordaeron as well. And this is where Lothar is holding council with King Taranis and Gen Greymane and Thoris Trollbane, Dalen Proudmoore, Archmage Antonidas of Dalaran, and another man by the name of Aiden Perrinhold of Alterac, who will come into play here in a second.
Some big names you just listed off right there, man.
Pretty much all of them are major players throughout the entire story. They either are going to come into play now, or their children are going to come into play in the Third War and stuff. And when I did read this, it was kind of shocking to see, because we also have a few more big names coming in too. Initially hesitant of all these rulers forming together and seeing the benefit of actually forming this alliance. People like Gen Greymane and Perrinhold are really just like against it and constantly pushing for like, no, we can handle ourselves. You guys are being dramatic. But when the gnomes and the dwarves arrive, they're like, okay, maybe if the Khazmodan's already fallen, we should group up here. And this is what does form the very first alliance of Lordaeron. And in preparation, they also form a new organization called the Order of the Silver Hand. Their goal basically was, back in the first war, they had clerics, and clerics were really good at keeping people alive and healing wounds and reviving people, but they couldn't fight. And the orcs, being as brutal as they were, they would recognize this and quickly just start targeting the clerics, target the healer.
Smart. Let's have that add-on. Healers have to die.
Healers have to die, bro. Yeah.
I love that add-on.
So they were like, what if we made people who could both wield the light and could fight in battle? They have martial powers as well. And they're like, I like the way you think. So they would begin to train the very first group of paladins. And there would be 5 of them. They'd be based out of this city called Stratholme. And the first one
That's
would
where
be...
they came from? That's crazy. I didn't know that's what... Wow.
And the very first of these would be one of Lothar's proteges by a man named Toralion. The other would be Uther the Lightbringer, Tyrion Fordring, and Gavinrad the Dire, who is the man that Lothar actually left to guard Stormwind as he went to go to Karazhan.
He's the only one I don't know so far.
I actually don't really know much about him either.
Yeah.
They don't give much detail, I feel like.
But every other name... What's this last one? I'm curious.
Sadian Dathrahan?
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
I've heard the name before. It's a very, in-your-face name, I would say. It's hard to forget. All I know about Gavinrad is that he was who Lothar would leave in charge after the first siege of Stormwind, and he's also just kind of Lothar's protege as well. But they would train day and night to learn how to be the best combatants and to embody, what it means to be a paladin. They wanted them to be all of the greatest parts of humanity. So they would form them into this shield and weapon against the Horde, really. And it's just in time too, because the Horde is going to be finishing up their navy in the wetlands with the help of the goblins specifically. And with that, they set off trying to make their way north to Lordaeron. And that's where they're going to come into conflict with the Proudmoore fleet, which anyone who plays World of Warcraft knows that the Kultirans are supposed to be like the sailors of the world and whatnot. And this battle makes that very clear, because the orcs, they're not sailors, not at all. So the Proudmoore fleet pretty much immediately outmaneuvers them. They're outgunning them. They're just ripping to shreds this fleet. However, back in Grim Batol, Necros had actually managed to convert a clutch of these red dragon eggs into capable flyers for his men. So basically, under threat of killing Alexstrasza, they forced these dragon whelplings into combat, where they would just rain fire down upon the Proudmoore fleet. So while they were much better in a sea battle, they didn't really have anything to do to stop the air attacks. And as fire rained down, it would just scatter the fleet. So that would open up the path for the Horde to land in Hillsbrad. Just before this, back in the Blackrock Spire, Gul'dan would wake from his coma, just barely having learned where the Tomb of Sargeras was. He promises that if Doomhammer keeps him alive, he'll create new members, new soldiers that the Horde can fight for. And the only condition is that he's not allowed to use fel magic. So he's been experimenting with Cho'gall for a while, using the bodies of dead Alliance soldiers. And he's been trying to combine them with the souls of his slain Shadow Council. So he, through a lot of trial and error, eventually manages to get this done. And this is actually how the very first Death Knights come into existence.
He did that without fel.
He did it without fel. It's actually necromancy magic. And it's made a point, because Doomhammer...
He's cool with that.
Doomhammer's he finds them disgusting. He thinks they're abominable, but he cannot deny how effective they are in killing things and how they spread such terror amongst the ranks of the enemies. So as long as they don't use fel and they don't kill the planet, they're in. They are.
It's dark magic. Fel is dark.
Yeah, but I guess it's not as corrupting or something like that. But I mean, hey, as long as Orgrim gives the pass, I guess he's all cool with it. So that's when we get this Battle of Hillsbrad. And this Battle of Hillsbrad is a massive, massive clash. This is where we essentially see the very first Horde versus Alliance clash. You have a ranger group led by Illyria from the High Elven city of quel'thalas. You have gnomes and dwarves from Khazmodan. You have the human alliance of Lordaeron. And they, with their paladins, slam into the orcs and their death knights. And it's a pretty brutal affair. Orgrim's actually more doing this battle in an attempt to kind of outmaneuver them, because he does pretty quickly move the bulk of his army further north towards the hinterlands, where he seeks a alliance with the Amani trolls, a warlord by the name of Zul'jin, who he had promised a few years earlier, like, I'll free your people if, you help out our cause. And they're like, we'll help your people as long as you help us kill the High Elves, because we hate them. And he has one arm, and he's kind of a badass. He's basically a war hero from his own time. And he has a lot of respect amongst the Amani tribes. So as the Horde and Zul'jin make their way north with him, all of the Amani begin to join in behind him. And their goal is to, well, I guess we're just going to surround Lordaeron, kind of like how we did with Stormwind, and then we'll crush quel'thalas, and we'll send the full might of the Horde down upon Lordaeron. They do meet some resistance as they move through the hinterlands by a group of dwarves called the Wildhammer. They ride griffins, and they have magical lightning hammers. It's pretty fucking sick. But the Horde, with their dragons and with everything, they prove to be very effective. And there is also this other problem, because King Perenhold of Alterac, he's a traitor, and he agrees to let the orcs through Alterac Valley as long as they promise to spare his kingdom. Orgrim's like, sure, yeah, I'm down for it. And he lets the hordes through. So at the same time, basically, the orcs are looking for a way to get through the magical barriers of quel'thalas, which is the High Elven city super far to the north, on the northern coast, basically, of Eastern Kingdoms. And the elves are very magically gifted. It's a very challenging thing to do, but through Gul'dan and Cho'gall managing to empower even more ogres by using the same ancient rituals they used back in Highmaul, they did manage to desecrate one of these magical rune stones that protects the outer border of quel'thalas. So they do manage to get all the way to the walls of Silvermoon City itself. Unfortunately, it's really hard to get into Silvermoon. They don't really know why, but there is this magical well within the city called the Sunwell that basically is a super powerful font of magic and not likely to be undone by some, even the best warlocks, or no matter how many of your best mages you bring with you. So Doomhammer's like, all right, Gul'dan, you stay here. I'm going to Lordaeron, and you figure this shit out and come join us afterwards. And Gul'dan's like, yes, I will absolutely do that for you. Orgrim leaves, heading west-south, kind of. But that's when Gul'dan sees his opportunity to betray the Horde. He knows where the Tomb of Sargeras is, and now he has his clan that was made for him called the Stormreavers, and he also has his group of Twilight Hammer with Cho'gall. So he says, fuck it. And he takes his two clans with Cho'gall, and he just goes to leave. He heads for the west coast of the continent so that he can head off into the sea where he knows the Tomb of Sargeras is. And the Amani and the other members of the Horde are initially like, well, that's going against orders, but they don't want to fight with him because they're worried that it'll just end up with both of them dead. So they let them go. And with that being the case, they basically immediately have to retreat. The Amani are pushed back all the way to their small lands that they still have in the north by the High Elves and the assistance of the Alliance armies that are arriving as well. And Doomhammer hears about this as he's getting ready to siege Lordaeron. He sends one clan, a group called the Blacktooth Grin clan, to hunt down Gul'dan, but he knows that he's going to need pretty much everybody to take Lordaeron at this point. So Gul'dan takes the ships that they had left on the coast as they were leaving Hillsbrad, and the Blacktooth would essentially take the remainder of them. Gul'dan still has a good bit of time on him, but as they reach the Broken Isles, they begin to raise the Tomb of Sargeras, and it's a spell that takes a while. So just as they manage to get it out of the water and get it all set to go, the Blacktooth managed to catch up to them. So Gul'dan tells the Twilight's Hammer to hold them off while he takes his Storm Reavers in, and they will collect the power. And then when they have the power, they'll be able to just kill them, and it won't matter. Unfortunately, Kil'jaeden and Sargeras, who were ordering Gul'dan to do everything up until this point, were also being betrayed in this moment. They didn't tell Gul'dan to go there or to get this power. So he's overcome with hubris, basically. And as he comes in there, all of these demons that have been empowered by the fallen avatar of Sargeras, they just rip and tear all of his followers apart. They've been trapped in there for like however many years since Aeduin buried this place, and they slaughter him. They absolutely rip him to shreds. And there's only like 1 or 2 Storm Reavers that survive, and they barely manage to get out of the tomb with just the skull of Gul'dan, and that is it.
Gul'dan died?
Gul'dan dies.
Huh.
Yep. It's interesting how we ended up in the modern day.
There's like so many
Gul'dans. I know.
Because wait, if he dies there and then he comes back and
then he dies in the Nighthold,
and then there's alternate time.
Yeah, that is the one that dies in the Nighthold is the alternate timeline Gul'dan. But now basically, the Horde is alone. They needed the reinforcements of the Twilight Hammer, and they needed the reinforcements from the Storm Reavers, and they really did not have the manpower to stop all of the elves and any of the Alliance armies that were fighting to the north. So as Lord'Aran's being sieged, all these Alliance armies from the north begin to show up, and Orgrim sees the writing on the wall, and he's like, all right, this is lost. We don't have any chance of winning this. We have to retreat. So they retreat back to Khazmodan. And then the Alliance, led by Anduin Lothar, they see their opportunity to push back. And to be honest with you, this is literally like, up to what we've talked about now, this has been the Horde campaign of Warcraft 2, and then we're about to enter the Alliance campaign, because the Alliance are just going to have them backsliding from here on out. They push them to Khazmodan, and then they quickly free all of the gnomes and dwarves of Ironforge and Nomergon. And then from there, the remainder of the Horde is basically all in the Blackrock Spire, and Orgrim knows that this is where his final moment is going to be. He knows this is where the final battle is going to be determined. The Alliance are tired. They're going to keep pushing us back if we lose here. So we need to break them here, because this is the defining moment of the war. So he sees the only option is to do something wild. So he sees the sea of blue and gold, it's described, marching on the burning steps. And he knows that he has to find a way to shatter their will. So he makes a suicide charge with all of his orcs as the gates of Blackrock Spire swing open. And he charges down with the goal of facing off against their leader, thinking that if he can kill him, then he'll break their will. So he charges through the lines, and Orgrim faces off against Lothar.
Oh, that's badass.
It is badass. They say that the battlefield momentarily fell completely silent, but as the battle continued on, Orgrim with the Doomhammer would shatter Lothar's rune blade, and as he did, would crush the skull of Lothar.
Oh!
And it said, literally, it just says simply, he was the better warrior. And the orcs would roar in triumph, believing that the death of this leader would shatter their resolve. And it's, at this time, a young paladin by the name of Turalyon would rush forward, taking up Lothar's broken rune blade as he would cry out to the rest of the Alliance. It said a beam of light so blinding that no one could see him rains down upon him. He says, "We are the sons and daughters of Lothar. We carry his dream of ridding this horde from the world. For Azeroth, for the Alliance, for Lothar." He strikes Orgrim unconscious, and seeing this happen, the Alliance, they're renewed. They found their strength again, and they overwhelmed the remaining horde. The different orc clans begin to buckle from the inside. Essentially, they start scrambling in all directions, trying to flee south. but most of them seem to be heading for, well, Stormwind's gone, so they're kind of heading back to their main base of operation of the Black Morass. And this is what would end up kind of being the final battle of the Second War, as the Alliance forces imprison Doomhammer and a bunch of the remaining orcs, hunting down all of the other ones. They would find themselves standing in what is now described as the Blasted Lands. I can only assume that it has now been corrupted by the Fel magic. They're being led by a man named Terran Gorefiend, which is actually one of the Death Knights that Gul'dan had created. He's one of the few that remain. And with that being the case, he tries to hold off the Alliance long enough for their kind to escape through the Dark Portal. And it only basically buys them enough time, because the full might of the Alliance is crashing down upon them, and they just barely manage to get the Skull of Gul'dan through the portal, and Terran Gorefiend goes through the portal, when Khadgar and a group of the mages of the Kirin Tor manage to unweave the magics of the Dark Portal, and it explodes from the other side. Basically, it's said as they go through that the portal itself just explodes off of Draenor, and it will have more effects later as we talk about some of the TBC stuff. But on Azeroth, there is now just a unraveled magical pile of ash.
Sorry to backtrack, but Lothar was a warrior, correct?
Lothar was a warrior, and I did double check this. He's not a paladin. Also, I did find out that, you know how we briefly spoke last time? I was like, I wish we had more information about this blade. Turalian's like blade that has the like glowing end to it, that's actually Lothar's shattered rune blade.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
So Lothar was a warrior. He got crushed, and then Turalian the paladin is what I mean, it sounds about right. The paladin, divine shielded, wings, and you know, what was the warrior gonna do, dude?
Yeah, he was just getting beat on by probably a bunch of ads while he was bubbled and shit, bro.
I mean, it sounds about right. The paladin coming in to save the day, you know.
But yeah, with the Horde forces dwindled and retreated beyond the Dark Portal with the Skull of Gul'dan, the connection between the two worlds severed. Azeroth was free from the invasion of Draenor, for now at least. And many of the Alliance soldiers would weep with joy, knowing that the wars that they had finally fought so hard for were over. Thank you so much for making it to the end of this episode. Your guys' support truly means the world to us. If you're interested in hearing more, we have our full show on YouTube and Spotify, new episodes dropping every Tuesday. I also want to take this moment to give a special thank you to Fantasy Lo-Fi for providing the music for this episode. You can find them on YouTube at Fantasy Lo-Fi or on Spotify under Bits and Hits. Be sure to show them some love, as their music does truly bring this journey to life. Once again, thank you for joining us on Tides of Lore, and we will see you next week.